The first time Douglas Whitmore struck his wife in public, it was beneath crystal chandeliers and charitable applause. He smiled as he did it. A firm grip at Olivia James's wrist. A tightening of fingers meant to instruct, not injure. A quiet correction delivered in front of donors' attorneys and board members who pretended not to see. Vanessa Clark stood beside him, composed, almost amused. Olivia did not pull away. She did not argue. She only looked at her husband as if memorizing him. What Douglas did not know, what no one in that ballroom knew, was that 12 hours earlier, Olivia had become the controlling owner of the $605 million empire he believed was already his. If you believe dignity matters more than volume, stay with this story until the end. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from and your local time. It's always grounding to know who stands for justice across different corners of the world. And if you value stories where truth speaks through evidence, not revenge, consider subscribing. Olivia James had learned long ago that volume was often a substitute for evidence. She did not raise her voice because she did not need to. In the quiet of the Whitmore townhouse on the Upper East Side, silence carried farther than shouting ever could. It moved through hallways, lingered in door frames, settled between sentences. Olivia understood that. She had grown up in rooms where power rarely announced itself loudly. It simply existed, structured into contracts, board votes, inheritance clauses. She kept a leather notebook in the second drawer of her nightstand. Dark brown, unremarkable. Inside were not diary entries, not emotional confessions. Dates, times, exact phrases. March 3rd. You wouldn't understand the numbers. April 11th, transfer discussed. No details provided. April 28th, Vanessa present again. Unscheduled. She wrote without commentary. Douglas Whitmore preferred that she did not. In public, Douglas was precision. He shook hands firmly. He remembered spouses' names. He donated strategically. His suits were tailored within an inch of intention. People described him as decisive, visionary, commanding. In private, he was careful in a different way. You don't have to worry about that, he would say, sliding a folder away from her side of the desk. It's complicated. Olivia would nod. Not because she agreed. Because she was observing. Whitmore Holdings Group had been referred to casually in their marriage as Douglas's company. He allowed that impression to settle wherever it pleased. At galas, at charity boards, at dinner parties, people congratulated him on quarterly expansions. He accepted the praise with modest deflection. What few understood was that the majority share structure had always traced back through Olivia's maternal line. Her grandfather had built the logistics arm from a 2-truck freight operation in Ohio. Her mother had expanded it into interstate infrastructure contracts. By the time Olivia was 25, the holding company had diversified into warehousing, regional transport systems, and municipal supply chains. Olivia had never wanted to be the visible heir. She studied economics quietly. She sat in on board meetings without speaking unless asked. She learned how voting blocks shifted when certain directors leaned back in their chairs. She understood debt structures before she understood marriage. Douglas understood optics. When they met, he admired her restraint. He called it grounded. He said he found it refreshing. Over time, admiration became interpretation. She's not interested in the operational side, he would explain to colleagues. I handle that for us. Olivia never corrected him. It was not that she lacked interest. It was that she lacked illusion. Vanessa Clark entered their lives officially as an external strategy consultant. MBA, aggressive portfolio background, impeccable resume. She was efficient with numbers and warmer with Douglas than professional necessity required. Vanessa never dismissed Olivia outright. That would have been impolite. Instead, she asked questions edged with suggestion. "Do you actually enjoy these board briefings?" Vanessa once asked, lightly over wine. Olivia met her gaze. Enjoyment isn't the metric. Vanessa smiled, as if that answer confirmed something. Douglas began scheduling more late strategic sessions. Vanessa's car appeared in the driveway often enough to feel routine. Staff stopped asking. Olivia wrote it down. May 17th, 11:40 p.m. Office door closed. Laughter. She did not confront him that night, or the next. Confrontation, Olivia understood, was rarely about truth. It was about performance, and Douglas excelled at performance. Instead, she watched patterns. Financial statements began arriving summarized rather than itemized. A new advisory firm appeared in expense reports: Clark Strategic Solutions, LLC. Retainer fees, consultancy charges, round numbers that felt too smooth. Efficiency restructuring, Douglas explained when she inquired mildly. Olivia nodded and wrote June 2nd, CSS, LC, recurring. Verify later. She did not press him. Pressing would have alerted him. The townhouse itself reflected Douglas's sensibilities more than hers. Neutral palettes. Modern art selected by recommendation rather than affection. Olivia's personal spaces were smaller: a reading alcove by the upstairs window, a desk tucked near the back garden doors. On that desk sat her laptop and a separate encrypted external drive. She transferred copies of documents quietly. She never removed originals. She simply mirrored what passed through her hands. The estate situation had intensified over the past year. Her mother's health had declined in measured stages. Hospital visits became scheduled rather than emergency. Lawyers began attending family meetings. Douglas attended as well, attentive and solemn. "It's about protecting what your grandfather built," he said gently beside Olivia's hospital chair one afternoon. Her mother's eyes had rested on Olivia when Douglas said it. There are protections that look like guardianship, and there are protections that look like boundaries. Olivia understood the difference. After her mother's passing, condolences flowed in with orchestrated sympathy. Douglas managed calls. He fielded inquiries. He suggested timelines. "Probate will take time," he told friends confidently, "but will maintain operational stability. We." Olivia noticed how easily that pronoun left his mouth. A week after the funeral, she found a sealed envelope addressed to her alone. It had been forwarded from her mother's private attorney. The return address read Henderson, Pike and Rowe, LLP. Douglas saw it in her hand. "Anything I should know?" he asked, tone casual. "It's administrative," Olivia replied. He studied her for half a second too long. That night, she wrote only one line. July 14th. He's anticipating. Anticipation, when paired with entitlement, could become dangerous. Vanessa's presence grew less concealed in the weeks that followed. She began arriving before dinner and leaving after midnight. Once Olivia entered the kitchen unexpectedly and found them mid-conversation, voices low, shoulders angled toward each other. They separated slightly when they saw her. Not guiltily, strategically. Vanessa said smoothly, "We were just discussing upcoming municipal bids." Olivia poured herself water. Of course. She noted Douglas's irritation, not at being interrupted, but at being observed. Control required ignorance. And Olivia was not ignorant. She sensed the shift building beneath the surface of their marriage, like pressure accumulating under reinforced glass. Douglas believed he was guiding outcomes. Vanessa believed she was engineering leverage. Both assumed Olivia's silence equated to absence. They were mistaken. What Douglas did not know was that Henderson, Pike and Rowe had scheduled a private consultation the following morning. What he did not know was that Olivia had already confirmed attendance alone. What he did not know was that the sealed envelope contained language he would never have drafted himself. But at this stage, Olivia had not yet opened the future. She was still watching the present. That night, Douglas stood behind her as she reviewed quarterly summaries. "You trust me, don't you?" he asked softly. "Trust." The word lingered. Olivia closed the folder gently. "I trust documentation," she replied. He smiled as if she had made a joke. She did not. In the drawer beside her desk, the leather notebook grew heavier by the week. She did not know exactly when Douglas's ambition had shifted into calculation. Perhaps it had always been there, disguised as drive. Perhaps Vanessa had only sharpened what already existed. The narrator knows something Olivia did not yet confirm, but had begun to suspect Douglas was not planning to share power. He was planning to absorb it. And he believed he had time. Olivia turned off the study light shortly before midnight. The house fell into quiet sections again. Somewhere downstairs, a door clicked closed. A phone vibrated against wood. She lay awake longer than usual, not afraid, not yet, only measuring. By morning, she would step into a law office on Lexington Avenue and learn what Douglas did not know. But tonight, she simply wrote one final entry before sleep, July 20th. Prepare. Whitmore Holdings Group had never been loud about its power. It did not manufacture consumer brands or court media attention. Its influence moved in quieter channels, freight corridors, municipal supply contracts, infrastructure, logistics across state lines. If highways remained repaired on schedule and hospitals received equipment without delay, Whitmore Holdings had likely touched the chain somewhere. Its valuation, just over $605 million when last assessed, was not the kind that appeared on flashy lists. It was the kind that endured. And legally, structurally, historically, it had always belonged to Olivia James's family. The original incorporation documents bore her grandfather's name, Samuel James, a man who preferred handshake agreements, but insisted that every handshake be backed by paperwork. When he expanded from Ohio into Pennsylvania and Illinois, he restructured the company to protect generational control. Shares were divided carefully, voting rights separated from simple equity. Spousal claims limited through layered trusts. He had not trusted optimism. He had trusted contracts. Olivia grew up understanding that distinction. While other children memorized multiplication tables, she memorized the difference between Class A voting shares and Class B income shares. Her mother, Eleanor James, had insisted. Control, Eleanor once told her over tea at 17, is not about visibility. It's about structure. The person who understands structure never needs to shout. Olivia remembered that sentence often, especially now. In the year leading up to Eleanor's passing, estate attorneys began visiting the townhouse discreetly. Meetings were scheduled during late afternoons when Douglas claimed to be at the office. Eleanor preferred that. Douglas did not object to the visits. On the contrary, he made a point of appearing supportive. He brought coffee. He offered logistical suggestions. He asked careful, seemingly innocent questions about timeline and succession. When the time comes, he said one evening, resting a hand at the small of Olivia's back, we'll make sure everything transitions smoothly. The pronoun settled again. Eleanor's gaze had lingered on him when he said it. Not suspicious, not approving, simply measuring. There are moments in families when awareness passes without language. Eleanor had built Whitmore Holdings into something resilient. She had married once, divorced once, and rewritten bylaws twice. She understood how affection and access could blur into entitlement. In the final months of her illness, she requested private time with her attorneys more frequently. Olivia sat beside her hospital bed during some of those conversations, listening without interrupting. Terms floated in the air: irrevocable trust, controlling interest, protective clauses, spousal firewall. Douglas waited in the hallway during those meetings. He scrolled through emails. He spoke with Vanessa in low tones. Vanessa Clark had begun attending strategy sessions more aggressively around the same period. Her consultancy contract expanded. Her access broadened. She presented growth projections that leaned heavily on aggressive acquisition models. We could double valuation in 5 years with the right leverage. Vanessa said during one internal review meeting, clicking through slides. Leverage. Douglas liked that word. Olivia noticed how often Vanessa's projections required centralized authority. Rapid decision-making, streamlined control. Board consensus slows us down, Vanessa remarked once, glancing briefly at Olivia. Too many cooks. Olivia responded evenly. Governance exists to slow down risk. Vanessa smiled politely, but her eyes sharpened. In truth, the company's structure had been deliberately designed to prevent precisely the kind of rapid consolidation Vanessa proposed. Voting shares remained clustered under the James family trust. Operational leadership could be delegated, but ultimate authority required majority voting control that could not be transferred through marriage. Douglas knew this in theory. He simply believed theory could be negotiated. After Eleanor's funeral, condolences blended with quiet inquiries from board members. Harold Benton, the longtime CFO who had worked with Samuel James in the early years, approached Olivia privately at the reception. "Your mother was careful," Harold said, voice low. "She believed in structure." "I know," Olivia replied. He studied her for a moment longer. "And you, I believe in documentation." He nodded once as if reassured. Douglas meanwhile worked the room. He reassured directors about continuity. He referenced expansion strategies Vanessa had prepared. He spoke as though operational transition was inevitable. Not once did he correct anyone who assumed he would step into de facto control. Olivia allowed the assumption to breathe. Back at the townhouse, paperwork accumulated in organized stacks. Probate filings moved forward quietly. Henderson, Pike, and Rowe handled estate administration with methodical precision. Martin, Pike's senior partner, communicated sparingly and directly. When Olivia received the sealed envelope summoning her for a private consultation, she understood its significance before opening it. Douglas noticed her stillness as she read the return address. "Administrative?" he asked. "Yes," she said. He waited, expecting elaboration. She offered none. That night, Douglas lingered longer in his office. Vanessa's voice drifted faintly through the partially closed door. "You'll need clarity soon," Vanessa said. "Once probate finalizes, things move fast." "I know," Douglas replied. "She won't push back. She never does." Silence followed. Olivia stood in the upstairs hallway long enough to hear that sentence clearly. She did not react outwardly. She did not confront them. Instead, she returned to her bedroom and opened her leather notebook. July 16th, she won't push back. The assumption was not entirely wrong. Olivia did not push. She positioned. In the days leading to her meeting at Henderson, Pike, and Rowe, she reviewed historical corporate documents stored digitally in the company's secure archive. Access logs confirmed her credentials remained intact. No restrictions had been placed. No voting shares transferred. Yet, she studied the trust language again. Article 4, Section 3. Protective mechanisms. Spousal exclusion clauses were explicit. In the event of inheritance by direct descendant, no marital partner could claim voting authority without explicit written consent from the beneficiary. Consent. The word carried weight. Douglas had been asking for signatures more frequently. Routine updates, banking consolidations, efficiency restructuring. None directly referenced voting shares. But some language hinted at proxy authority in undefined scenarios. Olivia copied those documents into her encrypted drive. Meanwhile, Vanessa's consultancy invoices increased. Clark Strategic Solutions, LLC, billed Whitmore Holdings for strategic advisory retainer services. Round numbers. Recurring. Olivia traced the account routing numbers quietly. The receiving bank was not one historically used by the company. She wrote July 18th, CSS payments irregular. Cross-reference post-probate. The narrator understands something Douglas does not yet fully grasp. Timing matters. Estate transitions create windows. Windows create opportunities. Douglas believed this window belonged to him. He believed Olivia's silence signaled compliance. But silence can also be surveillance. On the morning of July 20th, Olivia dressed in a charcoal suit rather than black. Grief did not require theatrics. She left the townhouse without announcing her destination, Douglas noticed. Meeting, he asked from the breakfast table. Yes, with whom legal? He paused, then smiled. Good. We need clarity. We. Olivia met his gaze steadily. Yes, she said. She did not clarify further. As her car moved downtown toward Lexington Avenue, the city blurred into structured lines of glass and steel. Henderson, Pike, and Rowe occupied the 27th floor of a building that favored discretion over branding. No large signage, no ostentation. Martin Pike was waiting when she arrived. He did not waste time on condolences. Miss James, he began sliding a folder across the polished table. Your mother finalized the controlling transfer 3 days before her passing. Olivia listened without interruption. Effective immediately upon probate filing, you hold majority voting shares of Whitmore Holdings Group, approximately 62% controlling interest. Your husband holds no voting authority under the trust structure. The air did not shift. Olivia had anticipated something of this magnitude. Protective clauses, she asked. Extensive, Martin replied. Your mother was explicit. No spousal access to proxy voting. No financial consolidation without your direct authorization. Additionally, there are contingent triggers should coercion be suspected. Coercion. Olivia absorbed the word carefully. When does disclosure occur? She asked. Board notification within 72 hours of probate finalization. And my husband Martin's expression remained neutral. That depends on you. Olivia closed the folder gently. For months, Douglas had spoken as though the company were his future. He did not yet know it had never been available to him. Olivia stood extending her hand. Prepare formal notice, she said, but delay announcement until statutory minimum. Martin nodded. As she left the building, the weight she carried was not triumph. It was clarity. Douglas believed he had time to maneuver. He did not understand that the structure he sought to control had already shifted beyond his reach. And he certainly did not understand that Olivia, whom he believed would not push back, now held the only signature that mattered. The folder Martin Pike had placed in front of Olivia that morning was thick but yet not dramatic. No embossed crest, no theatrical language. Just pages numbered, tabbed, cross-referenced. Structure. By the time Olivia returned to the townhouse that afternoon, she had already memorized the essential clauses. 62% controlling interest, immediate voting authority upon probate filing, irrevocable trust provisions shielding those shares from marital transfer, emergency protective triggers in cases of coercion or financial manipulation. Her mother had not left her sentiment. She had left her insulation. Douglas was in the kitchen when Olivia entered. The late summer light cut across marble countertops in clean angles. Vanessa stood near the island, reviewing something on a tablet. Both looked up. How did it go? Douglas asked easily. Efficient, Olivia replied. Vanessa's gaze sharpened just slightly. Estate lawyers tend to drag things out. This firm doesn't, Olivia said. Douglas watched her longer than usual. He was accustomed to reading rooms, to detecting leverage in posture and tone. Olivia offered none. Good, he said finally. We'll want to consolidate accounts once probate clears. Clean structure moving forward. Olivia set her bag down gently. I'll review everything first. Douglas's smile tightened at the edges. Of course. That night, he brought documents to her desk again. Just preliminary housekeeping, he explained. Bank authorization updates, some advisory restructuring. Olivia reviewed the first page slowly. The language appeared neutral at first glance, standard financial management phrasing. But buried in paragraph 4 was a clause referencing temporary discretionary authority in the event of beneficiary incapacity or administrative delay. Beneficiary. The word had shifted. Administrative delay, Olivia asked mildly. Probate overlap, Douglas replied. These transitions can create gaps. There is no gap, Olivia said quietly. Vanessa, seated across the room, glanced up. Douglas laughed softly. You don't have to stress about semantics. Olivia did not argue. She simply turned the page. Another clause referenced expanded proxy rights in urgent board decision scenarios. The wording was broad enough to stretch. She closed the folder gently. I'll have counsel review it, she said. Douglas's expression flickered just briefly. There's no need to involve external counsel in internal family matters, he replied. Structure, Olivia said, meeting his eyes, is not a family matter. Vanessa stood, then smoothing her skirt. We're only trying to protect you, Olivia. Protection can be offered in 2 ways, as shelter or as confinement. Olivia knew which this was. "I appreciate the concern," she said evenly. "I'll respond tomorrow." She did not sign. That evening, once alone in her reading alcove, Olivia scanned the documents and uploaded copies to her encrypted drive. She cross-referenced the clauses against the trust provisions Martin had highlighted earlier. There was no administrative gap. Probate finalization would activate immediate controlling authority. Douglas either misunderstood that, or he hoped she did. The narrator knows which is true. 2 days later, probate filing completed at 9:14 a.m. At 9:16 a.m., Henderson, Pike & Rowe submitted formal ownership documentation to Whitmore Holdings Corporate Counsel. At 9:19 a.m., automated board notifications were queued for distribution, pending statutory release window. Olivia received confirmation via secure email. Douglas did not. He was at the office that morning with Vanessa reviewing what he believed were upcoming expansion projections. He spoke confidently about future restructuring, about consolidating voting shares under a streamlined executive authority. Vanessa listened attentively. "Once we secure majority proxy," she said, "the board won't resist." Douglas leaned back in his chair. "She won't fight it. Confidence can be a blinding force." At 10:03 a.m., Harold Benton, CFO of Whitmore Holdings for nearly 3 decades, received formal notification of majority share transfer. He read it twice, then a third time. He did not call Douglas. Instead, he requested an emergency executive review meeting under governance protocol. At 10:22 a.m., Corporate Counsel flagged the update for internal compliance records. At 10:45 a.m., Douglas's executive assistant entered his office. "Mr. Whitmore," she said carefully, "there's a board notification circulating. Ownership update." Douglas frowned. "Ownership update." "Yes, sir." He reached for the email. As he read the header, his expression shifted, not dramatically, but precisely. His jaw tightened. His shoulders squared. Vanessa stood behind him. "What is it?" she asked. He did not answer immediately. Instead, he reread the line, "Controlling shareholder confirmation, Olivia James." Silence settled into the room. Vanessa leaned closer. "That can't be correct." Douglas's voice remained controlled. "Probate must have finalized." Without proxy discussion, Vanessa pressed. Douglas closed the laptop slowly. "She wouldn't," he said. "Wouldn't what?" "Wouldn't act independently, wouldn't claim authority, wouldn't step outside his narrative." The house that evening felt different when he returned. Not louder, just aware. Olivia was seated at her desk when he entered. "You went alone," he said without greeting. "Yes." "You didn't mention controlling shares." "You didn't ask," she replied. His composure strained at the edges. "You knew this was coming." "Yes." "And you didn't think we should discuss it?" Olivia looked at him calmly. "We are discussing it." Vanessa's name hovered unspoken between them. Douglas stepped closer. "You don't understand the operational burden this creates." "I do," she said. "You don't have the experience to lead board negotiations at this level. I have the documentation." His temper flared, then subtle but real. "This isn't about paperwork." "No," Olivia said quietly. "It isn't." For the first time, he seemed to recognize that something fundamental had shifted. Control had not been transferred gradually. It had been structured long ago. "You're making this adversarial," he said. Olivia did not respond. Instead, she opened her laptop and turned the screen slightly toward him. The trust clause glowed in clean legal language. Spousal exclusion, proxy prohibition, protective triggers in case of coercion. He read it in silence. "You went behind my back," he said finally. Olivia's voice remained even. "It was never yours to stand in front of." The statement was not cruel. It was factual. Douglas stepped back as though distance might restore perspective. For months, years perhaps, he had envisioned stepping naturally into executive dominance once Eleanor passed. Vanessa had reinforced that vision. It had seemed logical, efficient, inevitable. Now the structure he had underestimated stood firm in front of him. "You'll need guidance," he said after a long pause. This level of control invites scrutiny. I agree, Olivia said. That's why governance matters. His eyes narrowed slightly. Don't make this difficult. Difficult. The word carried threat under polish. Olivia closed her laptop gently. It already is. The narrator understands what Douglas does not fully calculate. Yet entitlement rarely dissolves quietly. When blocked, it searches for alternative routes. Financial, reputational, personal. That night, Douglas returned to his office and closed the door. Vanessa arrived 20 minutes later. Their voices were lower this time. Sharper. She can't handle this, Vanessa said. You know that. She won't step aside willingly, Douglas replied. Then you create pressure. Silence followed. Pressure can take many forms. Legal maneuvering, character assassination, isolation, or something more direct. Upstairs, Olivia opened her leather notebook and wrote only 2 lines. July 23rd board notified. He's recalculating. She did not feel triumphant. She felt alert. Because power once denied rarely retreats gracefully. And Douglas Whitmore was not a man accustomed to being denied. Douglas did not raise his voice the next morning. He adjusted. Men like Douglas Whitmore rarely exploded immediately when control slipped. They recalibrated first. They studied the new terrain, searching for openings, the way investors searched for undervalued assets. At breakfast, he poured Olivia coffee himself. Congratulations, he said, tone measured, controlling shareholder. The words sounded foreign in his mouth. Thank you, Olivia replied. Vanessa was not present, but her absence felt intentional strategic distance, while the temperature of the house was being assessed. Douglas slid a thin folder across the table. I've had counsel draft something that will streamline governance while you transition, he said. It protects you from unnecessary exposure. Olivia did not touch the folder immediately. Exposure, she asked. You're stepping into a public position whether you like it or not, he replied. Board politics, regulatory scrutiny. You don't need to shoulder that alone. Alone. It was an interesting choice of word. She opened the folder slowly. The heading read, Temporary Executive Delegation Agreement. The language was careful. It did not request ownership transfer. It did not explicitly claim voting shares. Instead, it proposed granting Douglas temporary executive authority in operational matters, requiring immediate strategic decision-making, citing Olivia's anticipated adjustment period. Anticipated. You've anticipated difficulty, Olivia asked calmly. It's reasonable, Douglas said. You've never led at this scale. She turned a page. There it was again, language referencing proxy authority in urgent corporate scenarios. Broad phrasing, flexible interpretation, and buried deeper authorization for consolidated financial oversight to ensure liquidity management during leadership transition. Liquidity management. Olivia understood that phrase. It allowed movement of funds without prior shareholder review. She closed the folder. I'll review it with Martin Pike, she said. Douglas's jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. There's no need to escalate this into legal posturing, he replied. We're married. Marriage, he implied, should override structure. Marriage does not replace governance, Olivia said quietly. His patience thinned. You're making this adversarial again. Olivia met his gaze evenly. You drafted it? The silence that followed was not loud. It was revealing. Douglas stood smoothing his tie. You're overwhelmed, he said, tone, softening artificially. That's understandable. I'm not overwhelmed, Olivia replied. You don't even like board meetings. I like minutes. He stared at her. Olivia had never framed her competence around preference. She framed it around documentation. Later that afternoon, while Douglas was at the office, Olivia scanned the delegation agreement and forwarded it to Martin Pike with a brief message. Please confirm interpretation, particularly Section 4B and liquidity clauses. Within 2 hours, Martin responded. Section 4B creates de facto proxy authority under emergency language. Liquidity clause allows discretionary fund movement without secondary sign-off. Strongly advise against signing. Olivia read the email twice. Not surprised, only confirmed. Meanwhile, Douglas met Vanessa at Clark Strategic Solutions' Midtown office. Space was modern, efficient, curated to project upward momentum. "She's not signing," Douglas said flatly. Vanessa leaned back in her chair. "She will if she believes she's outmatched. She thinks she understands structure." Vanessa smiled thinly. "Understanding structure isn't the same as surviving pressure." Douglas exhaled slowly. "The board meeting is in 3 days." "Yes," Vanessa replied. "And if she walks in unprepared, the directors will test her. They won't test her if I'm positioned as operational continuity." "Then secure it," Vanessa said. How Vanessa folded her hands neatly. Discredit, isolate, create doubt about her stability. The board values predictability. Douglas hesitated, not because he found the suggestion unethical, because he was calculating risk. "She's not volatile," he said. "She's controlled." Vanessa's eyes sharpened. Controlled can be reframed. The word lingered. Reframed. Back at the townhouse, Olivia received an alert on her laptop. A scheduled transfer request from Whitmore Holdings' operational account to Clark Strategic Solutions, an unusually large consulting disbursement. Pending approval. She checked the timestamp. Authorized by Douglas Whitmore. She checked the amount. It exceeded previous retainers by a factor of 3. Olivia did not confront him immediately. Instead, she opened the company's internal ledger and cross-referenced invoice numbers. The invoice referenced pre-acquisition advisory services. There was no acquisition pending. She wrote in her notebook, July 25th CSS invoice inflated. Pre-acquisition unspecified. Amount $2.8 million. She forwarded the invoice to Harold Benton, CFO. Subject line, clarification request. Harold responded within the hour. Not previously disclosed. Reviewing now. Douglas returned home later than usual that evening. Vanessa accompanied him. They entered the kitchen mid-conversation and paused when they saw Olivia seated at the island. "Did you need something?" Douglas asked. "Yes," Olivia replied calmly. "I forwarded today's CSS invoice to Harold." Vanessa's expression remained composed. "Routine advisory. For which acquisition?" Olivia asked. Silence. Douglas answered first. "Preliminary positioning." For what Olivia repeated. Vanessa stepped in smoothly. "Strategic flexibility requires preparation." Preparation for what Olivia asked again. Douglas's tone hardened slightly. "You're questioning operational discretion, now I'm requesting documentation," Olivia replied. The distinction was deliberate. Vanessa's patience thinned at the edges. "If you intend to micromanage every invoice, I intend to understand them," Olivia said. Douglas moved closer, lowering his voice. "You're sending signals to the board that you don't trust executive leadership." "I don't trust undocumented disbursements," Olivia replied. The conversation ended there, not because it resolved, but because Douglas chose to end it. He stepped back. "This isn't productive," he said. "We'll revisit it tomorrow." Revisit. Another word for pressure delayed. That night, Olivia noticed something else. Her access credentials to a secondary financial dashboard had been restricted. Temporary system maintenance, the notification read. She took a screenshot. July 25th. Access restricted 9:42 p.m. The narrator knows what Douglas is beginning to consider. If governance cannot be bent through persuasion, it can sometimes be bent through narrative. The next morning, Douglas called an informal board check-in without notifying Olivia. He framed it as a courtesy. Olivia is still processing the estate transition, he told 2 directors privately. She's understandably emotional. Emotional, a word designed to reduce credibility without appearing overtly hostile. One director, Margaret Ellison, asked carefully, "Is she stepping back?" Douglas smiled. Temporarily. Margaret did not commit. Later that afternoon, Harold Benton requested a meeting with Olivia at the corporate office. She arrived precisely on time. The CSS invoice Harold began closing the door behind him was authorized without standard acquisition documentation. "Is that typical?" Olivia asked. "No," Harold replied. "And the access restriction?" she asked. He hesitated. "IT received instruction from executive office." Which executive? Olivia asked. Harold did not answer verbally. He didn't need to. Olivia absorbed the pattern quietly. Financial expansion, narrative reframing, access limitation. It was escalating not explosively, but methodically. When she returned home that evening, Douglas was waiting in the study. "You're creating friction," he said without preamble. "I'm creating record," Olivia replied. He stepped closer, not touching her, but narrowing space. "You're making yourself look unstable, by asking for invoices, by acting paranoid." The word hung in the air. Paranoid. A soft launch of something darker. Olivia held his gaze. "If documentation feels like paranoia," she said evenly, "that's not my error." For the first time, something sharper flickered behind his composure. Not rage, not yet, but frustration that compliance was no longer automatic. "You don't understand what you're provoking," he said quietly. Olivia did, and she wrote that sentence down later that night. July 26th. "You don't understand what you're provoking." She did not feel fear. She felt confirmation. Douglas was no longer attempting to share power. He was attempting to reclaim it. And when reclamation through paperwork failed, men like Douglas rarely stopped trying. They simply changed tactics. Pressure, when applied gradually, is often mistaken for atmosphere. Douglas did not argue the next day. He became attentive. He sent Olivia flowers at noon, white orchids understated expensive. The note read, "We're stronger together." She placed the card inside her leather notebook. July 27th, orchids. Message reframing unity. That evening, he suggested dinner at home, rather than another late meeting. He cooked himself, or at least performed the visible parts of it. Vanessa did not appear. Over wine, he softened his tone. "I've been thinking," he said, slicing salmon with careful precision. "This transition is bigger than either of us anticipated." Olivia waited. "I may have pushed too quickly," he continued. "I assumed you'd want operational insulation." "I want transparency," she replied. "Of course." He nodded. "Then let's approach this as partners. Partners. A new word replacing leadership." "I'm listening," Olivia said. He outlined a revised proposal verbally, no documents this time. A joint executive committee. Co-signed financial disbursements. Public messaging that framed the company as unified under marital stewardship. "Optics matter," he added. "The board needs to see stability. Stability is not performance," Olivia said quietly. He studied her, recalculating again. "I need to know you're not going to undermine me at the meeting," he said. "Undermine. Another word positioned strategically." "I haven't undermined you," she replied. "I've asked for documentation." He leaned back. "And you forwarded internal invoices to Harold without consulting me?" "Yes. That signals distrust. It signals oversight." Their voices remained even. Calm arguments can carry more threat than shouted ones. After dinner, Douglas stepped outside to take a call. Olivia remained at the table, clearing plates slowly. The sliding door to the garden did not close fully. Vanessa's voice carried faintly through the evening air. "She's consolidating support," Vanessa said. "Harold won't move against her." "I can still shape narrative," Douglas replied. "Not if documentation contradicts you." A pause. "Then documentation changes," Vanessa said. Silence followed. Olivia did not move closer. She did not need to hear more to understand the direction. When Douglas returned inside, his expression had smoothed again. "Board dynamics are shifting," he said casually. "I'm aware," Olivia replied. That night, she encrypted another backup of company financial records. She also activated a secondary authentication protocol on her personal devices. The narrator understands something Douglas does not yet realize. Olivia has begun acting not as a spouse, but as a controlling shareholder under threat. The following afternoon, she received an unexpected call from Margaret Ellison, one of the longer-serving board members. "Olivia," Margaret began carefully, "Douglas mentioned you're still grieving heavily, that you might prefer limited visibility during the transition." "I'm grieving," Olivia replied. "I'm not absent." Margaret paused. "I thought so. Is there concern?" Olivia asked. There's confusion, Margaret said. He's positioning himself as interim operational lead. Under what authority? Olivia asked. That's unclear. Clarity matters in governance. Thank you for telling me, Olivia said. After the call ended, she wrote July 28th narrative shift underway. Emotional instability implication. Later that day, Harold Benton emailed both Olivia and Douglas regarding the pending $2.8 million CSS invoice, requesting documentation, supporting pre-acquisition advisory pending hold until verification. Douglas responded within minutes. Operational necessity. Documentation forthcoming. None was attached. Vanessa arrived at the townhouse that evening without prior notice. She carried a folder. We need to speak candidly, she said once inside. Douglas closed the study door behind them. Olivia remained seated. Vanessa placed the folder on the desk but did not open it. You're escalating routine oversight into obstruction, she said calmly. I'm exercising shareholder responsibility, Olivia replied. You're inexperienced, Vanessa said. In what? Olivia asked. Managing executives who understand expansion better than you. Olivia folded her hands. Expansion without documentation is liability, she said. Vanessa's composure thinned slightly. You think this is about invoices, she said. It's about control. Yes, Olivia replied. It is. The admission hung in the air. Douglas shifted his weight, impatience surfacing. You're destabilizing the company, he said. The company is destabilized by undocumented transfers, Olivia answered. Vanessa's voice cooled further. Boards respond poorly to leaders who appear rigid. Rigid, Olivia repeated softly. Uncompromising, Vanessa clarified. Governance is uncompromising, Olivia said. Silence expanded in the room. Vanessa finally opened the folder. Inside was a preliminary medical evaluation referral form. For executive wellness assessment, Vanessa said lightly. High-stress transitions can impair judgment. Douglas did not look at Olivia when Vanessa slid it forward. The implication was deliberate. Olivia read the heading carefully. Executive Cognitive and Emotional Assessment recommended. You believe I require evaluation? She asked. We believe Vanessa said that reassurance would benefit everyone. Reassurance for whom? Olivia closed the folder gently. I decline, she said. Douglas stepped closer. You declining suggests resistance, he said quietly. It suggests autonomy, Olivia replied. His hand tightened briefly on the back of her chair. Not striking, not yet, but claiming physical proximity as leverage. You're making this harder than it needs to be, he said. Harder for whom? Olivia asked. The narrator sees what Douglas is attempting now. If financial leverage fails and narrative framing wavers, psychological positioning becomes the next route. Gaslighting, reframing medicalization of dissent. Vanessa gathered the folder slowly. You're isolating yourself, she said. No, Olivia replied. You are. After they left the study, Olivia remained seated for several minutes. Her breathing was steady. She opened her notebook. July 29th. Medical assessment suggestion. Attempt to frame instability. She underlined the word attempt. The following morning, she contacted Martin Pike again. I anticipate narrative attack regarding mental stability, she said calmly over the phone. Document everything, Martin replied. And avoid private confrontations without record, I understand. Also, he added, consider personal safety protocols if coercion escalates. The word again, coercion. Olivia ended the call and scheduled installation of additional interior cameras under home security upgrades, legally registered, properly disclosed within household documentation. When Douglas noticed new camera placements later that week, he raised an eyebrow. Security concerns, he asked. Precaution, Olivia said. From what uncertainty? He did not respond, but his jaw tightened. That night, another conversation unfolded downstairs, voices lower, sharper. She's fortifying, Vanessa said. Then we accelerate, Douglas replied. How far are you willing to go? A pause. As far as necessary. Upstairs, Olivia sat by the window, city lights flickering beyond glass. She was not naive. Pressure was no longer atmospheric. It was directional. Douglas had moved from persuasion to narrative manipulation. If narrative failed, escalation would follow. And somewhere beneath his recalculations, impatience was growing. Olivia wrote one final line before closing her notebook, July 30th, acceleration imminent. She did not know precisely how it would manifest, but she understood this much. When entitlement is blocked, it does not dissolve. It hardens. And hardened entitlement, when cornered, becomes dangerous. The first time Douglas crossed from intimidation into violence, it was almost quiet. There were no shattered glasses, no dramatic shouting, no neighbors alerted, just a door closing too firmly. It happened 3 nights after Vanessa's suggestion of acceleration. Olivia had remained late at the corporate office reviewing board packets for the upcoming emergency meeting. Harold Benton had provided supplemental documentation, cash flow summaries, flagged irregular transfers, and a memo outlining governance concerns if proxy authority were ambiguously delegated. She returned home just past 9. Douglas was waiting in the study. The lights were dimmed except for a single lamp near his desk. A deliberate staging choice. Shadows soften edges. Shadows distort perception. "You're avoiding me," he said as she entered. "I'm reviewing documents," Olivia replied. "You didn't answer my calls. I was in meetings." He stood slowly. "I told you," he said, voice low. "We need alignment before Friday. Alignment requires clarity," she answered. He exhaled sharply. "You're embarrassing me in front of the board. I asked for invoice documentation. That's not how leadership works." "It is." The air shifted then, not loud but charged. Douglas stepped closer. "You think you're protected by paperwork," he said. "I am," Olivia replied calmly. His hand reached for her wrist. Not violently, firmly, a grip meant to correct posture. "You don't get to freeze me out of what I built," he said. "You didn't build it," she answered. The sentence landed. Hard. His grip tightened. Pain radiated along her forearm. "Careful," she said quietly. "Careful," he repeated. His fingers pressed deeper into the bruising pattern they would leave. "You're provoking consequences," he said. The word again. Consequences. Olivia did not pull away abruptly. Sudden resistance escalates impact. She understood that. Instead, she shifted her weight slightly and looked directly at him. "You're being recorded," she said evenly. The statement was not fully true, not yet, but it slowed him. He released her wrist instinctively and glanced toward the bookshelf, toward the corners of the ceiling. There were cameras now. Legal, registered. He stepped back, masking the flicker of uncertainty. "You're paranoid," he said. "I'm cautious." He turned away first. The moment ended without further escalation. But the line had been crossed. Upstairs, Olivia examined her wrist under bathroom light. The bruising was already forming distinct finger-shaped symmetrical. She photographed it from 3 angles, time-stamped. Then she placed a small digital voice recorder inside the inner pocket of her blazer for the following day. The narrator knows something Douglas has begun to forget. Intimidation leaves evidence. The next afternoon, Vanessa arrived earlier than usual. Douglas had requested she attend the pre-board strategy session at the townhouse rather than the office. A choice framed as convenience. Olivia entered the study mid-conversation. Vanessa's voice halted. "We were just discussing liquidity exposure," she said smoothly. "I'm aware of the liquidity exposure," Olivia replied. Douglas leaned against his desk. "You've escalated this into a compliance audit," he said. "I've escalated it into oversight," Olivia answered. Vanessa stepped forward. "You're destabilizing investor confidence," she said. "There are no external investors," Olivia replied calmly. "There is governance." Vanessa's composure cracked slightly. "You're inexperienced," she snapped. "You inherited authority. You didn't earn it." Silence settled. Douglas did not interrupt. Olivia looked at Vanessa steadily. "Governance is not inherited," she said. "It's structured." Vanessa laughed under her breath. "Structured," she repeated. "That's your shield." Douglas moved toward Olivia again. "You're humiliating me," he said quietly. "In front of whom?" she asked. His hand reached for her arm again, this time harder. Vanessa watched. She did not intervene. "You don't get to push me aside," Douglas said. "I haven't," Olivia replied, though her voice tightened slightly as his grip intensified. Pain sharpened. The recorder in her pocket captured every word. "Let go," she said calmly. "You think you're untouchable," he said. "I think you're mistaken." His other hand moved suddenly, pushing her back against the edge of the desk. Not a strike, a shove, but forceful enough that her hip collided with wood. Vanessa's breath hitched, not in alarm, but in anticipation. "Douglas," she said softly, almost coaxing. "She needs to understand what that force would replace persuasion." Olivia did not cry out. She focused instead on details. The clock on the wall, 4:17 p.m. The angle of Vanessa's reflection in the glass cabinet. Douglas's words. "You'll sign," he said. "No," Olivia replied. The word was quiet, definitive. He shoved her again harder. Her shoulder struck the corner of the bookshelf. The pain was immediate, sharp. Her phone in her other hand slipped to the floor. The fall triggered the silent emergency alert she had configured 2 days earlier. Location transmitted. Audio recording live. Douglas did not notice. Vanessa did. Her eyes flickered toward the fallen device. "Douglas," she said more urgently now. "Enough." But not out of compassion, out of calculation. Sirens are not immediate in Manhattan. There's lag, time. Douglas stepped back, finally, chest rising sharply. "You're forcing this," he said. Olivia steadied herself against the desk. "You're confirming it," she replied. He stared at her. For a moment, something uncertain passed across his face. Then anger returned to fill the space. Footsteps echoed faintly outside the townhouse entrance. Douglas froze. Vanessa moved toward the window. Police vehicles stopped at the curb. How, Douglas demanded. Olivia looked at him evenly. "I told you," she said. "You're being recorded." Knocking followed. Firm, authoritative. Douglas stepped backward as though distance could rewrite events. Vanessa's voice sharpened into composure. "Stay calm," she whispered. The narrator sees the shift, clearly escalation, had outrun calculation. Douglas opened the door. 2 officers entered. "Is everything all right?" one asked, scanning the room. Olivia stood upright, despite the swelling at her shoulder. "No," she said evenly. "It is not." Douglas attempted to speak. "There's been a misunderstanding." The officer's gaze moved to Olivia's wrist. Finger-shaped bruises darkening. "Ma'am," the officer prompted. "I would like to file a report," Olivia said. Vanessa stepped back, silent now. The recorder in Olivia's pocket continued capturing every breath. Douglas's confidence fractured visibly for the first time. "This is unnecessary," he said. "We can resolve this privately." "Not anymore," Olivia replied. The officers separated them. Procedure began. Statements taken. Body camera footage running. Vanessa's version wavered under simple questioning. "He grabbed her," she admitted finally. "But she provoked," the officer interrupted. "Provocation doesn't justify assault." The word settled heavily. Assault. Douglas looked at Olivia as though seeing her for the first time. Not as compliant, not as silent, but as positioned. As officers escorted him outside for formal questioning, neighbors' curtains shifted subtly. The townhouse that once projected immaculate control now displayed vulnerability under flashing lights. Olivia did not watch him leave. She focused instead on the paramedic examining her shoulder. "Any dizziness?" the paramedic asked. "No," she replied. "Pain level manageable." She was transported for documentation. Not dramatics, documentation. At the hospital, photographs were taken professionally. Medical notes recorded precise injury dimensions. Time logged, audio preserved. When Martin Pike arrived an hour later, he did not look surprised. "Protective order," he said quietly. "Immediately." Olivia nodded. "Corporate implications?" she asked. "Substantial," he replied, "because violence once documented collapses narrative. It reframes instability. And Douglas Whitmore had just provided the clearest documentation yet." As Olivia lay back against the hospital pillow, ice pressed gently against swelling skin, she did not feel triumph. She felt confirmation. Acceleration had arrived, and it had been recorded. The charity luncheon at the Harrington Ballroom had been scheduled months in advance. Long before probate filings, long before invoices, long before sirens outside the townhouse. It was one of those events Douglas considered essential high-net-worth donors, municipal contract liaisons, philanthropic board members who preferred crystal chandeliers to conference rooms. Optics lived there. Influence moved there. Olivia had originally planned not to attend. Martin Pike had advised minimizing public exposure until the protective order hearing concluded. The police report had been filed. Charges were pending review. Douglas had been released that night on preliminary conditions pending further inquiry. But the luncheon remained on the calendar, and Douglas insisted on appearing. If we don't show, he told Vanessa 2 days later in a recorded call that would later matter, it signals fracture. It is fracture, Vanessa replied. It's optics, Douglas corrected. Olivia received a formal notice from corporate counsel that morning. As controlling shareholder, her presence would be appropriate, especially in light of governance questions circulating quietly among directors. She dressed in navy. Not black, not symbolic, structured. Her shoulder remained tender beneath the fabric, but the bruising at her wrist had deepened into a visible crescent of shadowed fingerprints. She did not conceal it. The Harrington Ballroom shimmered under chandeliers that had seen a century of strategic smiles. Round tables were set with polished glassware. A string quartet played softly near the stage. When Olivia entered, conversations shifted subtly. Not dramatic, measured. Margaret Ellison approached first. "I'm glad you came," Margaret said quietly. "So am I," Olivia replied. Across the room, Douglas stood beside Vanessa. He wore composure like a tailored suit. Crisp, uncreased. If one did not look closely, nothing appeared disrupted. He noticed Olivia almost immediately. For a fraction of a second, something flickered across his face. Not fear, not remorse. Calculation. He crossed the room. Vanessa followed. "You look well," Douglas said, stopping just short of touching distance. "I am," Olivia replied. His gaze moved to her wrist, a tightening of his jaw. Vanessa offered a polite smile. "It's important we show unity today." Unity. The word had grown hollow. "Governance will show itself," Olivia said. Douglas leaned slightly closer. "Don't make a scene," he murmured. Olivia held his gaze. "I won't," she said. The luncheon progressed through speeches about community investment and responsible expansion. Douglas delivered prepared remarks on behalf of Whitmore Holdings, steady, confident, referencing future infrastructure initiatives. He did not mention the police report. He did not mention the pending protective order hearing. He did not mention that the controlling shareholder sat 3 tables away. When he concluded, polite applause followed. Then Margaret Ellison stood unexpectedly. As chair of governance, she said into the microphone, "I'd like to acknowledge the leadership transition within Whitmore Holdings." The room shifted. Douglas's smile held. Margaret continued, "Miss Olivia James, our controlling shareholder, has stepped formally into majority authority under established trust provisions." A pause. Applause again, lighter, uncertain. Olivia stood briefly in acknowledgement. Douglas's hands clapped once, measured. Vanessa's expression cooled. After the speech, donors approached Olivia with careful congratulations. Some glanced at her wrist. Some pretended not to see. Then it happened. A donor from Chicago, an older contractor who had worked with Samuel James decades prior, approached Douglas directly. "I didn't realize you weren't majority," the man said casually. Douglas smiled thinly. "Technicalities." "Not technical," Olivia said evenly, having stepped closer. Silence expanded in a small radius around them. Douglas's hand moved before he seemed fully aware of it. He gripped Olivia's wrist again, not violently, but firmly enough to signal possession. "We don't need to debate structure here," he said quietly, though those nearest heard the edge. The ballroom had grown perceptibly still. Olivia did not pull away. She looked at his hand, then at him. "Let go," she said. The words were calm, measured. His fingers tightened for half a second. Just enough. Vanessa stepped forward, voice low but urgent. Douglas. He released her. But the mark was already there, fresh pressure over fading bruises. Witnesses had seen it this time. Not neighbors behind curtains. Not officers responding to an alert. Board members. Donors. Municipal partners. Margaret Ellison's expression hardened. Harold Benton, standing near the stage, did not look away. Douglas laughed lightly, attempting to smooth the moment. Marital debate, he said. We're passionate. No one responded. Olivia lifted her wrist slightly, just enough to expose the overlapping bruising. I filed a police report 3 days ago, she said evenly. The room did not gasp. It quieted. Douglas's face lost its color in increments. Vanessa's composure fractured visibly for the first time. That's inappropriate, Douglas said sharply. Inappropriate, Olivia repeated softly. Margaret stepped forward. Is this true? She asked. Douglas attempted to answer first. It was a misunderstanding. I requested medical documentation, Olivia said calmly. It was provided. Harold's voice cut through. Corporate counsel is aware, yes, Olivia replied. Silence deepened. Because violence once acknowledged publicly refuses to shrink back into private explanation. Douglas's mask slipped then, not fully but enough. You're humiliating me, he hissed under his breath. No, Olivia replied. You did that. The quartet had stopped playing. Donors shifted uncomfortably. Vanessa attempted one final reframing. Olivia is under extraordinary stress, she said carefully. Transitions can distort perception. Medical reports do not distort, Olivia answered. Margaret's gaze moved from Douglas to Vanessa. Board session tomorrow, she said firmly. Mandatory attendance. Douglas attempted to recover authority. We can't let personal matters derail. Assault is not personal when it affects governance. Margaret interrupted. The word landed again. Assault. Not misunderstanding, not marital disagreement. Assault. Douglas looked around the ballroom as though searching for allegiance. He found none. Optics had shifted, and this time, not in his favor. The luncheon concluded awkwardly. Donors departed in controlled clusters. Conversations were hushed. Olivia did not linger. She stepped outside into afternoon light that felt almost ordinary. Martin Pike stood near the curb. You anticipated escalation, he said quietly. Yes, and public confirmation I didn't plan it, Olivia replied. He did. Martin nodded. Protective order hearing is tomorrow morning, he said. Board session tomorrow afternoon. Sequence, structure, procedure. Behind them, through the ballroom windows, Douglas and Vanessa argued in sharp, restrained gestures. Acceleration had become visible now. Not atmospheric, not whispered, documented, witnessed. And tomorrow the board would no longer be debating invoices. They would be confronting pattern. As Olivia entered the waiting car, she did not look back. She did not need to. The room had already turned. The morning after the luncheon, the courthouse steps were quieter than the ballroom had been. No chandeliers, no quartet, just gray stone and procedural timing. Olivia arrived 10 minutes early for the protective order hearing. Martin Pike walked beside her, a leather briefcase in hand, expression composed. Douglas arrived separately. Vanessa did not stand at his side this time. Inside, the courtroom felt smaller than it should have. Protective order hearings rarely carried spectacle. They carried documentation. The judge, a woman in her late 50s with reading glasses balanced low on her nose, reviewed the preliminary file before anyone spoke. Police report, medical documentation, photographs, audio transcript excerpt. Mrs. James, the judge, began. You're requesting a temporary order of protection pending further proceedings. Yes. Your Honor, Olivia replied. Her voice did not tremble. Douglas's attorney attempted the expected reframing. Your Honor, this was a domestic misunderstanding during a period of high stress. My client has no prior history. The judge raised a hand. The audio transcript indicates a direct statement you'll sign, followed by physical contact consistent with documented injury. Silence. Douglas stared straight ahead. Olivia did not look at him. The judge continued. There was also a subsequent public incident at a corporate event. Yes, Your Honor, Olivia said. Mr. Whitmore, the judge said, shifting her gaze. Did you grab your wife's wrist at the Harrington Ballroom? Douglas hesitated. It was not violent, he said. That was not the question. Another pause. Yes, he answered. The judge nodded once. Temporary order granted, she said. No contact outside corporate proceedings. No proximity within residential property. Further hearing scheduled in 30 days. The gavel did not slam, it tapped. Procedure complete. Outside, Douglas spoke for the first time. You're dismantling everything, he said quietly. Olivia met his gaze evenly. No, she replied. You did. He almost smiled, but it failed. You think the board will side with you. I think the board will side with documentation. The corporate board session convened at 3 o'clock that afternoon. Whitmore Holdings' executive conference room was designed for composure. Long walnut table, frosted glass walls, no unnecessary decoration. All directors were present. Harold Benton sat near the end of the table files, neatly aligned. Margaret Ellison presided. Douglas entered last. Vanessa did not attend. Her consulting status had been flagged pending review. Margaret opened the session without pleasantries. We are here to address governance concerns, she said, specifically controlling share confirmation, unauthorized financial transfers, and allegations of assault involving executive leadership. Silence followed. Douglas folded his hands. I remain operationally capable, he began. Personal matters have been exaggerated. Olivia did not interrupt. Margaret turned to Harold. CFO report. Harold cleared his throat. Over the past 8 weeks, Clark Strategic Solutions, LLC, received $4.6 million in advisory retainers. Documentation supporting acquisition strategy remains incomplete. Douglas interjected, strategic positioning requires discretion. Discretion does not negate documentation, Harold replied calmly. Margaret turned to Olivia. Miss James is controlling shareholder, your position. Olivia opened a thin folder. Inside were copies of the invoices, the access restriction screenshot, and the trust clause, confirming spousal exclusion from proxy authority. I request immediate suspension of all discretionary payments to Clark Strategic Solutions, pending forensic audit, she said evenly. Additionally, I request temporary removal of executive signatory authority from Mr. Whitmore during investigation. The words were not loud. They did not need to be. Douglas leaned forward. This is retaliation, he said. For what Margaret asked. For a domestic dispute. Margaret's expression cooled. The dispute intersects with corporate authority, she said. Another director, Thomas Grady, spoke for the first time. Is there evidence that financial activity was linked to coercive behavior, he asked. Olivia did not answer immediately. Instead, she slid a printed email across the table, recovered through internal audit logs. From Douglas to Vanessa, dated 3 days before the assault. Once we secure proxy, liquidity is flexible. Silence thickened. Douglas's face hardened. That email is being misinterpreted, he said. Then clarify, Margaret replied. Douglas did not, because intent once written resists reinterpretation. Harold spoke again. We have also identified attempted system access restrictions placed on Miss James's shareholder dashboard. Douglas's composure thinned. Security update, he said. Without board approval, Harold countered. Margaret exhaled slowly. This is no longer about marital discord, she said. This is governance integrity. Olivia remained still. She had not raised her voice once. She had not insulted him. She had presented documentation. Margaret turned to the board, motioned to initiate independent forensic audit and suspend Mr. Whitmore's executive signatory authority pending review. Hands raised, one by one, unanimous. Douglas did not look at Olivia when the motion passed. He looked at the table. The removal was procedural, not dramatic, but decisive. You're making a mistake, he said quietly. Margaret answered evenly. Documentation rarely is. The meeting adjourned. Douglas stood abruptly, chair scraping against polished wood. As he reached the door, he turned. You think this ends here? He asked. Olivia's response was measured. It ends where the record ends. He left without replying. The forensic audit began that week. Daniel Reeves, a certified forensic accountant with no prior ties to Whitmore Holdings, was engaged. He did not rely on summaries. He relied on trails, bank routing numbers, timestamps, authorization codes. Within days, the pattern sharpened. Clark Strategic Solutions had received funds not only from corporate accounts, but from a secondary operational reserve tied to emergency liquidity lines. Transfers overlapped precisely with probate finalization dates. Email threads revealed strategic language. Pressure, timing, narrative. And one line from Vanessa, written in response to Douglas's frustration: "If she won't sign, we create urgency." Urgency had arrived in the form of bruises. Daniel presented preliminary findings to the board and Olivia privately. "There is sufficient indication of attempted financial manipulation contingent upon proxy acquisition," he said, "and possible fraud exposure." Olivia absorbed the statement quietly. "Criminal?" she asked. "Potentially," Daniel replied. That evening, alone in her temporary apartment, Douglas barred from the townhouse. Under the protective order, Olivia opened her notebook. She reviewed earlier entries. Orchids. Medical assessment suggestion. Access restriction. You'll sign. Pattern. It had always been pattern. The narrator understands that Douglas still believes he can regain narrative control. But narrative weakens under forensic light, and forensic light had only begun to illuminate. Olivia closed her notebook and looked out at the city skyline. Justice, she understood, was not loud. It was procedural. It moved through filings, audits, sworn statements. It required patience. And she had always been patient. Suspension did not look dramatic. There were no security escorts, no headlines splashed across financial pages. Whitmore Holdings was not the kind of company that fed tabloids. It lived in procurement databases and municipal filings. But inside the executive floor, the shift was unmistakable. Douglas Whitmore's keycard stopped working at 8:03 a.m. on Monday. He stood outside the glass entry for a full 5 seconds before trying again. The light remained red. Inside, 2 mid-level managers pretended not to notice. Across town, Olivia sat in a temporary office Harold Benton had arranged neutral space within the company's legal wing. Not the executive suite Douglas once occupied. Not yet. She did not ask for it. Authority, she understood, did not require theater. Harold entered with a stack of preliminary audit updates. Reeves's team found 3 additional transfers routed through a secondary vendor, he said. Layered billing? Clark Strategic Solutions, Olivia asked. Indirectly, Harold replied. Through a shell consultancy registered in Delaware 6 weeks ago. Timing mattered. 6 weeks ago was the same week Douglas began pressing more aggressively for proxy language. Olivia did not react visibly. Preserve all records, she said. Already done. Harold hesitated before adding, There's resistance building, from whom 2 directors feel the public assault allegation may complicate shareholder confidence if escalated. Complicate, Olivia repeated softly. Harold nodded. They prefer internal resolution. Internal resolution, a phrase often used to bury misconduct. Olivia folded her hands on the desk. The record is no longer internal, she said. He understood. Later that afternoon, Douglas requested a private meeting with Margaret Ellison. It was denied. Instead, he received formal notice pending audit review and protective order conditions. He was to refrain from entering corporate premises without board approval. He called Vanessa immediately. They've boxed me out, he said. Then you apply pressure elsewhere, she replied. Financial, no, she said. Reputational. Douglas exhaled slowly. They won't believe she's unstable now. Not unstable, Vanessa corrected. Erratic, emotional, overreaching, narrative refinement. That evening, an anonymous tip reached 2 local business reporters suggesting internal instability at Whitmore Holdings following a domestic breakdown. Olivia read the online piece the next morning. It was careful, vague, speculative. Sources indicate leadership tension following estate transition. No mention of assault. No mention of forensic audit. Just instability. She forwarded the article to Martin Pike and corporate counsel. Response hold statement, Martin advised. Do not react emotionally. Facts will surface through process. Olivia agreed. Silence, when strategic, is not weakness. Across the river, Douglas met with one of the dissenting directors privately. You're letting her dismantle executive continuity, Douglas argued. She has controlling shares, the director replied. She's inexperienced. She's documented. Douglas leaned forward. This will damage valuation. The director considered that. Valuation suffers more under fraud investigation, he said quietly. Douglas left without another word. Meanwhile, Daniel Reeves's audit deepened. Forensic mapping revealed email deletions on Douglas's corporate account coinciding with large transfers. Recovery tools restored fragments. One email from Vanessa stood out. Board won't move unless optics force them. Another from Douglas, then we create optics. The phrase lingered. Create optics. The assault at the townhouse. The wrist at the ballroom. Was it impulse or escalation born of urgency? The narrator knows that intent often reveals itself in timing. That afternoon, Olivia attended a compliance briefing with corporate counsel. We need to prepare for potential criminal referral, counsel said. On what grounds? Olivia asked. Fraud if funds were diverted for personal gain contingent upon proxy acquisition. And assault that proceeds separately through district attorney review. Olivia nodded. Parallel tracks, corporate and criminal. Structure separating emotion from consequence. Later, as she reviewed archived board minutes from years prior, she found something her grandfather had once inserted after a hostile takeover attempt in the early 1990s. Governance survives ego. She traced the sentence lightly with her finger. Douglas, meanwhile, was losing patience. He drove past the townhouse that evening, despite the protective order's proximity restriction. He did not exit the car. He watched the windows. Control, once habitual, does not surrender easily. Vanessa called. You need leverage, she said. They've suspended me, Douglas replied. Then question the audit's independence. Suggest conflict of interest. Delay proceedings. On what basis perception is basis enough? But perception had begun to erode. The protective order filing was public record. The board suspension, though not broadcast, widely circulated quietly within executive networks. By Thursday, 2 municipal partners requested clarification regarding leadership continuity. Harold handled those calls. Governance remained stable, he said each time. Because it did. Under audit, under scrutiny, under structured transition, Whitmore Holdings continued operating. Freight moved, contracts executed, revenue flowed. Structure, unlike ego, did not fracture under pressure. On Friday morning, the board reconvened for interim review. Daniel Reeves presented updated findings. Evidence suggests attempted financial positioning contingent upon expected acquisition of proxy authority, he said. Funds routed through Clark Strategic Solutions and related entities show personal benefit exposure. Douglas's attorney objected to phrasing. Allegation he corrected. Preliminary conclusion, Reeves replied calmly. Margaret turned to Olivia. Do you wish to proceed with formal removal from executive leadership pending final audit? Olivia did not answer immediately. Removal was permanent, not suspension, not optics. A severance from operational control. She thought of the ballroom, of the wrist, of the phrase, you'll sign. Yes, she said. The vote passed. Not unanimous this time, but decisive. Douglas Whitmore was formally removed as CEO of Whitmore Holdings Group. He received the notification electronically. He did not respond. Instead, he drove to Vanessa's office. They've stripped me, he said. Vanessa's composure had thinned over the week. Then we escalate legally, she said. Challenge share structure, claim coercion in estate drafting. She has documentation, Douglas replied. Then discredit the documentation. How Vanessa's eyes narrowed. Attack the trust itself. Challenging a generational trust would not be simple. But desperation often breeds reckless strategy. That night, Olivia sat alone in her temporary apartment reviewing a copy of the trust instrument once more. Protective clauses, spousal firewall, Contingent triggers in cases of coercion. Her mother had anticipated many things, perhaps even this. Olivia wrote one line in her notebook before closing it. Governance survives ego. Outside, the city moved as it always did, traffic lights, distant sirens unrelated to her life. But somewhere else in the city, Douglas Whitmore was no longer recalibrating. He was cornered, and cornered entitlement does not dissolve quietly. It looks for fracture points. The question now was not whether he would push again. It was how. Cornered men rarely retreat. They compress. And compression, when combined with entitlement, becomes volatile. Douglas Whitmore did not challenge the trust instrument immediately. His attorneys advised against it too, visible, too complex, too likely to fail under scrutiny. The James family trust had been constructed with layered precision decades earlier. Instead, he pursued proximity. The protective order barred him from the townhouse and from direct personal contact outside corporate proceedings. But legal language, like all language, contains edges. He requested retrieval of personal effects from the townhouse through counsel. Martin Pike reviewed the request carefully. Legitimate property access can be scheduled under supervision, he told Olivia. But you are not required to be present. Olivia considered. Schedule it, she said. Midday. The townhouse felt different when she returned that morning. Emptier, controlled. 2 officers stood inside the foyer when Douglas arrived. He wore a navy suit, no visible strain. Vanessa did not accompany him. Olivia stood near the staircase. Not close, not distant, neutral. Douglas stepped inside slowly. This is unnecessary, he said, gesturing subtly toward the officers. Procedure, Olivia replied. He moved past her toward his study. Bookshelves, desk, photographs. The office still held the impression of authority he once assumed permanent. He opened drawers, carefully removing cufflinks, a framed diploma, a leather-bound portfolio. He paused when he reached the desk's lower compartment. Locked. He looked up. The key, he said. Olivia did not move. That drawer contains personal documents, he added. So does the audit, she replied. One of the officers shifted slightly. Douglas's jaw tightened. You think I'd hide something here? He asked. I think you anticipated time, Olivia said evenly. Silence pressed in. He stepped back from the desk. Keep it, he said. He finished collecting smaller items in silence. As he passed Olivia in the hallway, he lowered his voice. You've destroyed us, he said. Olivia met his eyes. No, she answered. You miscalculated. He left without another word. The door closed. But compression does not dissipate when doors close. It redirects. 2 days later, Vanessa requested a meeting with Olivia through counsel. Alone. Martin advised against it. She is now materially implicated in the forensic findings, he said. Direct contact is unnecessary. Not unnecessary, Olivia replied quietly. Predictable. The meeting was scheduled in a neutral conference room at corporate headquarters, security present outside. Vanessa entered first. Her composure was thinner now. Controlled but strained. I'm not here to fight, she began. Olivia waited. You've made this worse than it needed to be, Vanessa continued. Assault did that, Olivia replied. Vanessa's eyes flickered. You're collapsing an executive structure over a moment of emotion. A pattern, Olivia corrected. Vanessa leaned forward. You think Douglas acted alone? She asked. The implication hung between them. Explain, Olivia said calmly. Vanessa studied her carefully. You inherited power without understanding how fragile perception is. Douglas believed correctly that the board would hesitate to follow you. And so you escalated, Olivia asked. Vanessa's silence was answer enough. He needed authority, Vanessa said finally. You were blocking it. With documentation, Olivia replied. With resistance, Vanessa countered. And that justifies violence. Vanessa did not respond directly. You've triggered criminal exposure, she said instead. If this proceeds, there are consequences for more than just Douglas. A warning, perhaps even a veiled threat. Olivia did not react visibly. "Are you offering testimony?" she asked. Vanessa's composure fractured. "I'm offering resolution. Resolution requires truth," Olivia said. Vanessa leaned back slowly. "You don't understand how far he'll go," she said quietly. The statement was not dramatic. It was factual. "I do," Olivia replied. Security escorted Vanessa out. Martin entered moments later. "She's nervous," he observed. "Yes," Olivia said. "Because the audit?" he asked. "Because he's losing control," Olivia answered. That evening, compression became explosion. Douglas had spent the afternoon meeting with a second-tier attorney known for aggressive litigation tactics. The strategy proposed was simple contest: the forensic audit's independence file, an emergency injunction against corporate removal, and alleged shareholder coercion. But injunction filings required documentation, and documentation was not on his side. Frustration builds in layers. By nightfall, Douglas drove not to Vanessa's office, not to a lawyer, but toward the townhouse again. Protective order proximity restrictions were clear. He ignored them. He did not intend negotiation. He intended leverage. Olivia had returned to the townhouse briefly that evening to retrieve archived family documents for counsel. The officers were not present this time. It was outside scheduled access. The front door alarm triggered when Douglas entered, using an old access code he assumed still worked. It did not, but the side entrance once used by staff remained operational. He entered through there. Olivia heard the door. She did not run. She reached for her phone quietly. "Douglas," she said, as he stepped into the hallway. He looked different, not disheveled, but stripped of polish. "You think you can erase me?" he asked. "You're violating the order," she said calmly. "I built this life," he said. "You can't lock me out. You locked yourself out." His hand shot forward, grabbing her upper arm. Harder than before, angrier. "You'll withdraw the charges," he said. "No." He shoved her against the wall. This time there was no hesitation, no pause. Compression had broken. "You'll tell them it was exaggerated," he demanded. Olivia's voice remained steady despite the pain. "You're being recorded," she said again. This time, it was fully true. The townhouse security system, upgraded weeks earlier, streamed live to a secure cloud server monitored by corporate counsel after prior incidents. Douglas did not care. He pushed her again. Vanessa's earlier warning echoed in Olivia's mind. "You don't understand how far he'll go." She did, and she had prepared. The emergency alert activated automatically when impact sensors detected violent force beyond threshold. Within minutes, police vehicles arrived. Douglas did not flee. He stood in the hallway as officers entered. "Sir, step away," one commanded. He complied slowly. Olivia remained upright, against the wall, shoulder throbbing, breath controlled. He violated the protective order, she said evenly. Body cameras recorded everything. Handcuffs closed around Douglas's wrists with procedural precision. "You're making a mistake," he said again, though the words lacked conviction now. The officer read the violation clearly. Protective order breach, assault, criminal contempt. This time release would not be immediate. As they led him outside, flashing lights reflected off townhouse windows again. But there were no chandeliers this time, no donors, only documentation accumulating. Olivia sat on the staircase once the door closed. Paramedics assessed her. "Pain level 1 asked." "Higher than before," she replied honestly. Martin Pike arrived shortly after midnight. "He's being held," he said quietly. "Violation escalates exposure significantly." "And the board?" she asked. "Informed." Procedure was moving now. Not atmospherically, not gradually, directly. Olivia looked at the wall where her shoulder had struck. The house felt altered, not damaged, revealed. "You were right," Martin said softly. "Acceleration was inevitable." Olivia nodded once. "He mistook silence for surrender," she said. Outside, sirens faded into distance. Inside, structure held. And Douglas Whitmore, once certain he could bend governance to his will, now faced something far less flexible: procedure. Procedure does not rush, it advances. Douglas Whitmore's arrest for violating the protective order changed the tone of everything that followed. The first assault had introduced doubt into the boardroom. The second removed it. He was held overnight this time. Criminal contempt layered over assault charges altered bail considerations. The judge, now reviewing a pattern rather than an isolated incident, set conditions stricter than before: electronic monitoring, if released mandatory surrender of firearms, no indirect contact through third parties. Vanessa did not visit the holding facility. She retained separate counsel. Olivia did not attend the arraignment in person. She listened through Martin Pike's quiet summary afterward. Judge referenced the phrase "pattern of coercive conduct," Martin said in her temporary office. That language matters. Olivia absorbed it without visible reaction. Corporate implications, she asked. Substantial. Continued removal justified. Insurance carriers notified. Insurance carriers. The phrase sounded clinical, but corporate liability policies respond to documented misconduct. Directors' and officers' insurance requires disclosure. Banks review covenants when executive instability intersects with fraud exposure. Procedure branches outward. Daniel Reeves' forensic team accelerated its timeline. With Douglas's arrest, now public record, cooperating institutions moved faster. Deleted emails were restored in fuller sequence. One thread recovered from a secondary server backup was particularly precise. From Douglas to Vanessa: if she refuses again, we escalate pressure before the board locks vote. Vanessa's reply: then don't hesitate. Timestamp 48 hours before the first assault. Intent rarely announces itself more clearly. Daniel presented the thread in a closed executive session. No one spoke for several seconds. Margaret Ellison finally exhaled. That eliminates ambiguity, she said quietly. Olivia remained composed. She had anticipated this evidence. But anticipation does not dull confirmation. Meanwhile, Vanessa's counsel submitted a limited cooperation proposal to the district attorney's office. The implication was subtle. Vanessa would provide testimony regarding financial strategy and coercion planning in exchange for prosecutorial consideration, self-preservation. The district attorney's office requested formal proffer. Vanessa agreed. 2 days later, under recorded interview conditions, she described the strategy discussions with Douglas. He believed she would not resist, Vanessa said. When she did, he became urgent. Urgent, how the prosecutor asked. He thought if he secured proxy authority quickly, financial exposure could be repositioned. And when she refused to sign, Vanessa paused. He said he'd apply pressure, define pressure. Vanessa looked down briefly. Make her understand consequences. Physical, he didn't specify, Vanessa said. But escalation was implied. The transcript was precise. Vanessa's cooperation did not absolve her. But it reoriented the narrative. This was no longer marital conflict. It was coordinated coercion intersecting with financial manipulation. Back at Whitmore Holdings, Daniel Reeves finalized preliminary audit findings. Funds totaling $6.2 million had been routed through layered consultancy vehicles with limited documentation overlapping probate transition and proxy discussions. Intent to benefit contingent upon acquiring executive authority was inferred from recovered communications. Harold Benton read the report twice before forwarding it to external counsel. Criminal referral warranted, he said in the board session that followed. Margaret nodded. Motion to refer forensic findings to District Attorney and Securities Division. Hands raised, unanimous this time. Corporate structure had chosen preservation over loyalty. Olivia spoke only once during the meeting. Ensure employee stability communications are clear, she said. Operations continue. She did not mention Douglas by name. Outside corporate walls, media coverage sharpened. Local business outlets now referenced executive misconduct, protective order violations, and forensic audit exposure. Olivia did not issue interviews. Silence aligned with documentation holds weight. Douglas was released under monitoring conditions pending trial. An ankle device, restricted zones. He returned not to the townhouse, but to a short-term rental apartment arranged through counsel. Vanessa ceased direct communication with him. Her cooperation agreement prohibited coordination. Isolation for the first time enclosed him. He attempted one final maneuver. Through a civil filing, his attorney sought emergency injunction, claiming marital financial coercion and unilateral governance abuse. The petition alleged Olivia weaponized inheritance timing to marginalize him unfairly. Martin Pike read the filing calmly. "They're reframing victimhood," he said. "Will it hold?" Olivia asked. "No," he replied, "because the trust instrument predates the marriage. Trust documents once quiet background architecture now became central evidence." In court, the injunction hearing was brief. The judge reviewed the trust structure, spousal exclusion clause, irrevocable share designation, premarital execution dates. "Petition denied," she said simply. Douglas did not react visibly. But something in his posture shifted. Restraint was no longer strategy. It was limitation. The criminal case moved into discovery. Audio from the first assault, video from the second. Email threads mapping escalation. Bank records. Protective order violation documentation. Each element reinforced the same arc: pressure, refusal, escalation. Meanwhile, Olivia authorized an internal restructuring plan at Whitmore Holdings. Interim CEO appointment from within executive ranks. Harold Benton declined the title formally but accepted temporary oversight with board approval. External compliance review implemented. Vendor contract reevaluation initiated. Clark Strategic Solutions contract terminated. Legal demand letters issued for restitution. Employees were informed through measured internal memo. Whitmore Holdings remains operationally stable under existing governance structures. Independent review processes are underway to ensure compliance and integrity. No drama, no names. Structure speaking for itself. One evening, weeks after the second arrest, Olivia returned briefly to the townhouse alone. The walls bore no visible scars, but memory lingers in space. She walked through the study slowly. The desk drawer Douglas had once requested remained locked. She opened it with the key she had retained. Inside were older documents, personal notes, a printed draft of the delegation agreement she had refused to sign. And beneath it, a handwritten line in Douglas's script, once proxy secured liquidity flows. She placed the paper into an evidence envelope. Documentation continues. As she closed the drawer, her phone buzzed. "Martin, the district attorney is moving forward with formal charges," he said. "For both?" she asked. "Yes, assault, criminal contempt, conspiracy to commit fraud under review." Olivia exhaled slowly. Not relief. Completion of phase. Procedure does not deliver satisfaction. It delivers consequence. That night alone in the townhouse's quiet upper floor, she opened her leather notebook. The entries had grown denser over the months. Orchids, invoices, medical assessment suggestion. "You'll sign, acceleration imminent." She turned to a blank page and wrote, "Procedure has a pulse, because it does. It advances steadily, unmoved by ego, unmoved by optics. It accumulates, and once it reaches critical mass, it does not need to shout. Discovery does not feel dramatic. It feels meticulous. Box by box, file by file, line by line." In the months that followed Douglas Whitmore's second arrest, the criminal case moved into formal discovery. Subpoenas were issued. Devices were surrendered. Depositions were scheduled under oath. Olivia approached this phase the same way she had approached everything else. Prepared. She did not attend Douglas's deposition. She did not need to. But she read the transcript afterward. He had worn a gray suit. His tone, according to Martin Pike, was restrained but strained. The prosecutor began simply. "Mr. Whitmore, did you at any time seek proxy authority over Whitmore Holdings Group?" "Following your wife's inheritance, I sought operational continuity," Douglas replied. That was not the question. Silence. Yes, he said finally. Did you condition financial movements on securing such authority? No. The prosecutor slid a document across the table. An email, once proxy secured liquidity flows. Is this your writing? Douglas paused. Yes. And what did you mean by liquidity flows operational flexibility? He said. Operational flexibility for whom? For the company. Then why were funds routed to entities directly linked to Miss Clark's personal holdings? Douglas did not answer immediately. In deposition, transcripts pauses are recorded as brackets. Pause. Intent reveals itself in pauses. Vanessa's deposition followed a week later. Her counsel had negotiated limited immunity in exchange for cooperation on the financial conspiracy component. Under oath, her tone shifted from controlled to clinical. Yes, we discussed applying pressure, she said. Define pressure, the prosecutor asked. Creating urgency before the board could consolidate under Olivia. And how would urgency be created? Vanessa's jaw tightened. Through reputational framing and escalation. Physical escalation. I did not instruct him to strike her, Vanessa said. That was not the question. Another pause. I knew he was losing control, she admitted. And I did not stop it. Negligence can be as revealing as action. Meanwhile, forensic accountants finalized the tracing of diverted funds. The total now exceeded $7.4 million. Layered billing structures, consultancy invoices lacking deliverables, personal expense overlaps, travel luxury accommodations, discretionary transfers. Each transaction time-stamped. Each authorization code matched to Douglas's credentials. When Daniel Reeves presented the complete financial map in executive session, the board sat in silence. Margaret Ellison spoke first. This was not mismanagement, she said quietly. It was extraction. Olivia did not respond verbally. But the word settled. Extraction. Not partnership, not oversight. Extraction contingent upon control. The criminal indictment followed shortly after. Assault in the second degree. Criminal contempt for protective order violation. Conspiracy to commit financial fraud. The charges were precise, structured. Douglas surrendered voluntarily under counsel advisement. No spectacle, just process. The courtroom during pre-trial hearings was smaller than the ballroom had been. Less polished, more honest. Olivia attended this time. She sat behind the prosecutor's table, hands folded in her lap. Douglas avoided looking at her at first, then briefly he did. Not anger, not remorse, something closer to disbelief. As though the architecture he had assumed flexible had hardened unexpectedly around him. The judge reviewed bail conditions and scheduled trial. Pattern of coercive conduct, supported by documentary evidence, she said on record. Pattern. The word appeared again. Because this case was never about a single moment. It was about accumulation. In parallel, civil proceedings advanced. Whitmore Holdings filed suit to recover diverted funds from Clark Strategic Solutions and related entities. Asset freeze motions were granted. Vanessa's cooperation reduced her exposure, but did not eliminate restitution requirements. Under oath in civil deposition, she admitted awareness of financial repositioning contingent upon proxy acquisition. Language precise enough to matter. Olivia testified last. Her deposition lasted 3 hours. She answered each question evenly. Did you provoke Mr. Whitmore on the day of the first assault? No. Did you deny him marital partnership and governance? I denied undocumented authority. Did you anticipate his escalation? Yes. And why did you not confront him earlier? Because confrontation is not documentation. The court reporter paused briefly before typing the final word. Documentation. The trial date approached in late autumn. By then, media coverage had matured beyond speculation. The narrative was no longer marital breakdown. It was executive misconduct intersecting with domestic violence and financial fraud. In opening statements, the prosecutor framed it simply. This case is about control. When control could not be obtained legally, it was pursued coercively. Douglas's defense attorney attempted mitigation. He was overwhelmed by sudden transition. Emotional stress impaired judgment. Stress does not reroute funds. Stress does not draft delegation clauses. Stress does not write once proxy-secured liquidity flows. Evidence unfolded methodically. Audio from the first assault played in court. You'll sign. Video from the second assault displayed on monitors. Douglas pushing Olivia against the wall. No ambiguity. No narrative gap. The forensic accountant testified next. Funds were redirected with intent contingent upon anticipated executive control, Daniel Reeves said calmly. And how do you infer intent? Defense counsel asked. Because authorization and communication timelines align precisely with proxy discussions. Precision leaves little room for reinterpretation. Vanessa testified under cooperation agreement. She did not look at Douglas. He believed she wouldn't resist, she said. When she did, he escalated. And I enabled it. Her admission was quiet, but final. When Olivia took the stand, the courtroom was still. She described events without embellishment. I documented patterns, she said, because structure matters. Did you ever threaten Mr. Whitmore? Defense counsel asked. No. Did you ever deny him marital support? I denied him undocumented authority. The phrase repeated. Consistent, unwavering. In closing arguments, the prosecutor returned to a single theme. Governance survives ego. And when ego attempts to override governance, the law intervenes. The jury deliberated for 2 days, not dramatic, just thorough. When the verdict was read, there was no gasp, just confirmation. Guilty on assault, guilty on criminal contempt, guilty on conspiracy to commit financial fraud. Douglas Whitmore stood still as the words settled. Olivia did not react visibly, because verdicts are not triumph. They are conclusion. Sentencing would follow weeks later. Restitution calculations were underway. Corporate recovery proceedings continued. But something fundamental had already closed. The pattern had been named, documented, confirmed. As Olivia left the courthouse that afternoon, cameras waited at a distance. She did not speak. She did not wave. She stepped into the car and closed the door. Silence again. But not the silence of suppression. The silence of completion. Sentencing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in early December. Winter had settled over Manhattan in a restrained way. No dramatic snowfall, just a cold clarity in the air. The courthouse steps were lined with reporters again, though fewer than during the verdict. Public interest spikes at accusation and peaks at conviction. Sentencing is quieter, more final. Olivia arrived with Martin Pike and corporate counsel. She wore charcoal again, not black. She did not dress for mourning. She dressed for conclusion. Inside the courtroom, Douglas Whitmore stood beside his attorney. The confidence that once defined his posture had thinned into something more rigid, controlled but diminished. Electronic monitoring had been removed pending sentencing, but the weight of conviction remained visible. Vanessa sat several rows back. Her cooperation agreement required her presence. She did not meet Olivia's eyes. The judge entered without flourish. She reviewed the record. Mr. Whitmore, she began. This court has considered the pattern of conduct established through trial. Assault in the context of coercion. Violation of protective order. Conspiracy to divert corporate funds contingent upon acquiring authority. The courtroom was silent enough to hear the shuffle of paper. Power, the judge continued, is not a defense against accountability. Douglas's attorney requested leniency based on lack of prior criminal history, professional contributions, and emotional duress during a state transition. The prosecutor responded evenly. Emotional duress does not explain financial layering or repeated violation of court orders. The judge nodded. Sentencing must reflect both personal harm and institutional harm, she said. The sentence was structured. 18 months incarceration for assault and contempt concurrent. Additional financial penalties tied to restitution obligations. Supervised probation following release. Mandatory participation in a certified batterer intervention program. For the conspiracy charge, a suspended sentence contingent upon full restitution compliance. The gavel did not slam. It tapped once. Douglas did not react outwardly, but something in his expression collapsed inward. He glanced at Olivia once. She did not hold the gaze. Officers approached him quietly. Procedure continued. Vanessa's sentencing followed separately under her cooperation agreement. Reduced charges, probation, full restitution requirement, permanent bar from serving in executive advisory roles within publicly governed corporations. Consequences scaled to cooperation, not absolution. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered closer. Microphones extended. "Miss James, do you have a statement?" Olivia paused briefly. She had prepared one, but she did not read it. Instead, she said only, "This governance exists to protect people. I trusted it." Then she stepped into the waiting car. No elaboration, no condemnation. Back at Whitmore Holdings, the board convened that afternoon. Not to celebrate, to finalize. Margaret Ellison opened the session. "Sentencing has concluded," she said. "Corporate exposure now transitions fully into recovery phase." Daniel Reeves presented final restitution mapping. Assets frozen. Properties liquidated. Consultancy accounts dissolved. Projected recovery of diverted funds 78% within 12 months. Insurance coverage to offset remainder. Structure repairing itself. Harold Benton addressed executive succession formally. With Mr. Whitmore permanently removed and legal proceedings concluded, the board must confirm long-term leadership. Eyes turned toward Olivia. She had avoided the executive suite for months. Authority did not require corner office symbolism, but continuity required clarity. Margaret spoke carefully. "Miss James, as controlling shareholder, are you prepared to assume formal role as chair and interim chief executive officer?" Olivia did not answer immediately. She looked down briefly at the agenda in front of her. Lines, structure, votes, procedure. "Yes," she said. The vote passed, unanimous. No applause, just acknowledgement. Later that evening, she entered the executive office for the first time as its occupant. The space still carried traces of Douglas's tenure. Framed awards, architectural renderings of expansion projects. She did not remove everything. She removed only what was necessary. On the desk, she placed her leather notebook, not as decoration, as reminder. She opened it to the first page from months earlier, March 3rd. You wouldn't understand the numbers. She closed it again, because now she did more than understand them. She governed them. Over the following weeks, Olivia initiated structural reforms, enhanced audit oversight, dual authorization protocols for discretionary spending, mandatory board ethics training, anonymous reporting channels for executive misconduct. Not as reaction, as reinforcement. Whitmore Holdings' public communications remained measured. Leadership transition complete. Compliance systems strengthened. Operational continuity secured. Stock value, though privately held, stabilized under municipal contract renewals. Stability returns when structure is trusted. One afternoon in late December, Olivia walked through the warehouse division in Newark unannounced. Employees glanced up briefly. No spectacle, just quiet acknowledgement. A forklift operator nodded. "Ma'am." She nodded back. Power feels different when it is not performed. As the year closed, restitution payments began transferring into corporate accounts. Documentation tracked each installment. Douglas's personal properties vacation home investment accounts were liquidated under court supervision. Consequence mapped in numbers. Olivia reviewed the first restitution confirmation quietly. Not satisfaction. Completion of obligation. That evening, she returned to the townhouse one final time. The protective order had long expired. The house was legally hers, but it no longer held meaning. She walked through each room once. The study where compression turned to violence. The kitchen where orchids had once sat. The hallway where sirens echoed. She stood at the staircase landing and looked down. No anger surfaced. No triumph. Only clarity. She had not destroyed anything. She had documented it. And documentation had done the rest. She closed the front door behind her and handed the keys to the real estate agent waiting outside. The house would be sold. Not as escape, as transition. As she stepped into the winter air, the city lights reflected softly against glass towers in the distance. Whitmore Holdings would continue. Not because of spectacle, because of structure. And structure, when protected, outlives ego. By early spring, the townhouse had been sold. There was no ceremonial farewell. No final dinner beneath the chandeliers Douglas had once polished for donors. The closing documents were signed in a quiet conference room at Henderson Pike and Row. Olivia read every line. Not because she distrusted the process, because she respected it. When the final signature dried, the property transferred. The past did not disappear. It simply ceased to occupy square footage. Whitmore Holdings entered the new fiscal year under Olivia's formal leadership. Interim was removed from her title, Chair and Chief Executive Officer. The board confirmed it without dissent. In her first official address to senior management, she did not reference Douglas. She did not reference the trial. She spoke about structure. Governance is not obstruction, she said calmly. It is protection for employees, for partners, for future decisions that will outlast all of us. The room listened differently than it had a year before. Not because she raised her voice, because she did not need to. The restitution process continued in scheduled installments. Corporate counsel tracked compliance monthly. Douglas began serving his sentence in a minimum security facility upstate. Vanessa completed probation requirements and surrendered her professional licenses. Consequences moved quietly through their respective channels. Olivia did not follow their daily progress. She did not need to monitor what procedure had already secured. Instead, she focused on rebalancing internal culture. Executive compensation policies were revised to link authority with oversight benchmarks. Vendor relationships were audited across divisions. The Delaware Shell consultancy was fully dissolved through court order. Every structural vulnerability that had once allowed liquidity to flow without documentation was sealed. Not vindictively, precisely. One afternoon, Margaret Ellison joined Olivia in the executive office. "You've stabilized faster than expected," Margaret observed. Structure was already there. Olivia replied. It needed reinforcement. Margaret studied her quietly. "You never attacked him publicly." There was no need. Margaret nodded once. Some expected spectacle. "Spectacle fades," Olivia said. "Records remain." In late March, Olivia visited the original freight yard in Ohio, where her grandfather had begun with 2 trucks and a ledger book. The yard had modernized since then automated tracking systems, digital logistics platforms, but one brick office remained untouched at the edge of the lot. Inside, dust gathered along the windowsill. She ran her hand lightly across the old desk. Structure survives ego. Her grandfather's handwriting had been practical, not decorative. She sat there for several minutes without speaking. Power had never been loud in her family. It had been measured. She understood now more clearly than before why her mother had built protective clauses into the trust. Not out of suspicion of love, but out of understanding of leverage. Love does not exempt governance. Governance anticipates its absence. Back in Manhattan, Whitmore Holdings announced a new compliance initiative, partnering with domestic violence prevention organizations. The decision was not branded as redemption. It was framed as responsibility. Internal employees were offered confidential counseling resources. Policies were updated to address coercive behavior within leadership ranks. Not reactive, preventative. During a private board dinner in April, Thomas Grady raised a glass. "To resilience," he said. Olivia did not raise hers immediately. "Resilience is passive," she replied. "Accountability is active." The table quieted briefly, then glasses met softly. That evening, alone in her apartment overlooking the river, Olivia opened her leather notebook for the last time. The entries had charted months of escalation. Orchids, invoices, access restrictions. "You'll sign. Acceleration imminent. procedure has a pulse. She turned to the final blank page. For a moment, she did not write. Then she closed the notebook without adding anything. There was nothing left to document. The story had reached conclusion through process, not confrontation. Weeks later, sentencing documents finalized restitution compliance schedules, extending over years. Douglas's appeals were filed, but unlikely to succeed given the weight of evidence. Olivia did not attend those hearings. Her presence was no longer required. One quiet afternoon in early May, she walked out of Whitmore Holdings headquarters after a long board session reviewing quarterly growth metrics. The company had posted steady numbers. No dramatic surge, no collapse. Stability. Employees exited in clusters, greeting her respectfully, but without deference born of fear. She walked alone toward the sidewalk. The building's glass reflected her figure briefly, not triumphant, not wounded, composed. A reporter standing near the curb called out gently, "Miss James, do you feel vindicated?" She paused, considered. "No," she said. "Then how do you feel?" She looked at the street ahead. Clear. She continued walking. The city did not pause for her. Traffic moved, lights changed. Somewhere upstate, Douglas Whitmore followed a structured schedule dictated by correctional officers. Somewhere in a small compliance office, Vanessa Clark updated restitution paperwork. Consequence does not announce itself loudly. It accumulates, and then it stays. Olivia reached the corner and waited for the light to change. In her bag, the leather notebook rested quietly. She no longer needed it, but she kept it, not as evidence, as reminder. When the signal shifted to walk, she stepped forward into ordinary daylight. Not leaving in disgrace, not leaving in spectacle, just moving forward, with dignity intact. There are stories that end with shouting. This was not one of them. It ended with paperwork filed correctly, with signatures placed where they belonged, with systems doing what they were designed to do when someone finally insists they function as intended. Olivia James did not defeat Douglas Whitmore with anger. She did not expose him with spectacle. She did not humiliate him in the way he once tried to humiliate her. She documented. She waited. She allowed procedure to speak. Justice, in its most durable form, is rarely cinematic. It is administrative. It is methodical. It is patient. It does not rush to satisfy emotion. It arrives because someone refused to sign what should not be signed, because someone understood that silence is not surrender when it is paired with structure. If this story stayed with you, perhaps it is because you recognize that kind of strength, the quiet kind. The kind that does not demand applause. If you'd like to share where you're watching from and what time it is there right now, I read those messages carefully. And if you believe that dignity, documentation, and accountability still matter, you're welcome to stay connected here. Stories like this continue,